Raphel is being investigated upon for her illicit links with the Taliban and the Pakistani establishment. I'm being joined by an Indian diplomat who dealt with her when he was Joint Secretary Americas and also when she was Assistant Secretary of State from the United States of America. Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri, many thanks for joining us here on NewsX. A huge development, this US diplomat that you dealt with. What is the real deal with her and what are her links that we're talking about right now? If you could just explain the diplomat's role in how she dealt with India and also her close ties with Pakistan.
Well, she was political counselor in the American Embassy in New Delhi from 91 to 93. And I became Joint Secretary on the Americas desk, I think sometime in May 92. So I dealt with her in this to the extent that I knew she was in the American Embassy. But as a counselor level officer, she had already distinguished herself, within quotes, for displaying an orientation which was markedly pro-Pakistani, mischievous, and I would even go to the extent of saying sometimes worrying from the Indian point of view. She did not hide her orientation in terms of which way she was leaning. I did not have too much to do with her when she was a political counselor here, although all reports that I received from my colleagues in the Americas division and from our political system that she had managed to acquire access way beyond what a medium level officer in a foreign embassy here could. But I will tell you, based on my own recollection, what we had to deal with. After she joined the State Department as the first Assistant Secretary for South Asia, she gave a press conference in October of 93. In that press conference, she questioned the instrument of accession to India of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. She also stated explicitly that the entire territory of the state of Jammu and Kashmir is disputed territory. And obviously these reports were sent back by the large Indian press corps and created a furor here. I should like to clarify at this point that Raphel was not alone at that point of time in seeking to describe Kashmir as disputed territory. There was a Deputy Assistant Secretary in the State Department who preceded her, I think somebody called Mallet, and he had visited India earlier and he had also made noises to that effect. But this was part of a larger game. The the difference that she brought on this, that she was far more aggressive, far more explicit, and she did not hide the agenda that she was pursuing. But coming back to Raphel, she tried after that to make amends. She wanted to come to India. As Joint Secretary, I think one of my most satisfying moments was, by that time I had succeeded in persuading the Indian establishment, the Congress Party, and the then functionaries that she was bad news and that she should be dealt with at the level of Joint Secretary, and if she was to be given access at higher levels, it should be calibrated. But it's not always to control this. There are elements in our system. She had very important friends. Some of them later went on to become cabinet ministers.
Mr. Puri, how high up in the Indian administration?
Well, at that point of time, I think she had managed to certainly befriend a Minister of State at that point of time, and somebody who rose to be cabinet minister in the last UPA government became her open advocate, till a friend of mine, particularly close friend of mine then, who was with the Indian Express, wrote an editorial pointing out that whilst you have joint secretaries in the Ministry of External Affairs trying to draw the line when somebody is pursuing an agenda which is explicitly anti-Indian, there are parts of the political system. But as happens ever so often, the desire to improve relations with the United States ignoring the fact that the vitiated atmosphere was created by its own representative, got the better of our system. And Mr. Narasimha Rao, for whatever reason, was very keen to visit the United States. And the so-called opening up or softening which Robin Raphel wanted succeeded. And during that visit, and in the period prior to that visit, we took a lot of policy decisions which in the long run would have proved to be catastrophic from the point of view of India's security interests. Well, look at what they tried to do on the nuclear issues. Mr. Dixit was succeeded by a man as Foreign Secretary who is on record, and I don't know how people can live with their conscience, who says that the NPT is no longer an issue. Please remember that in '95 the NPT review conference was coming up. Also, please remember that the thrust of American policy at that point of time was to cap and roll back India's nuclear capacity. Please remember that Mr. Narasimha Rao at one stage actively toyed with the possibility of conducting nuclear tests. For some strange reason, he backed off. But if the attempts made by people like Robin Raphel with their collaborators in the Indian system, there's a very famous, very influential individual in the Narasimha Rao government, or on the, as a senior civil servant, who became even more prominent during the Manmohan Singh government, who actually wrote a note, which I had the privilege of reading much later, saying why India should not exercise the nuclear option. I mean, these were people who actually went out of their way to entrench a subservient status for India.
So I'm saying